Yeah, guys, filming out of Lab Gym, Cumbria, with Joe, yourself. We'll just start kind of. What's your story? What you're about? What's this spot that we're in? This mega spot?
Yeah, man. Yeah. So I think we're at an exciting part of the story right now, to be honest, where somehow we're nearly a year deep into lab in action, which is a pretty crazy feeling and thought, to be fair. It's like,
Yeah,
where's the last 11 months even went?
yeah. Did
So,
you come straight away as soon as it
Yeah,
opened? Yeah,
I think
straight.
yeah.
it's
What
fair.
the fuck?
You were like a diehard supporter, Luke, from the get go. Like,
Yeah,
as soon as we launched the socials, you were
me and my father
giving us a good bit of support. Like, it was
straight
nice to
from there.
see.
Now, for people who are watching at home and maybe don't know what lab is or are yet to find out what lab is, what is it and how do you 11 months ago, let's go 11 months ago, how did you get here? How did it all come about?
So a bit of a rewind. So with lab, really, the main vision was to try and create like a strength-based training facility for all people of all ages, and somewhere where you walk in and like you actually want to train. Because
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of places you walk in and like I don't know, it doesn't really uplift you if you like, you know.
Oh,
Like you might walk in one gym and CFM's on, and like there's a Lucasade advert, and you think, Christ, like I don't really want to deadlift to this, you know. So it doesn't really pull you in through the door. I think like sometimes if you go to a restaurant, like they don't play like the radio, they'll have something
no,
what
no.
matches what what they're doing to give it a bit of mood. And then I think previous to this, like I used to always do quite a lot of gym tourism. So if I was like maybe in Newcastle or maybe down the country or even on holiday, I'd go and try different gyms out.
Yeah,
And I'd try bits of kit and I'd think, oh, that feels really nice, that part. And then maybe that one doesn't feel the best. And just got us thinking really, you know, about like the design of
Yeah, yeah.
certain bits of kit and how they're made of the angles. And then I thought round the year, like there is a lot of decent gyms, but there's nowhere what sort
nah.
of captures it all.
Jumps out.
Yeah. And at the
Mm,
same time, also like giving people like the information and support. I think like back when I first started training, like you maybe asked the old fella in the gym what the best way to
yeah, yeah.
do that was. And I think now there's a lot more information online, but sort of bringing the two together and obviously bringing my dietetics and my coaching and my background on nutrition with strength training to try and basically promote the benefits. Because obviously looking good's a can't be it's one of the best benefits,
No,
really,
exactly.
isn't it?
Aesthetically pleasing.
But the benefits run a lot deeper than how you look. You know, it reduces your disease risk. It can increase, you know, bone mineral density, make you feel better, and it can basically make you live longer. And I think it's quite a fun form of training, isn't it? At the same time,
Oh, definitely.
You would make it fun, haven't you? I was gonna say one of the first things you said about when you walk in somewhere you want to train. Well, I was gonna make a point about all the mirrors. Personally, I've got a bit up my own backside, if you like, plenty of mirrors about. I mean, most gyms do nowadays, but one thing I noticed straight away was you're looking at yourself in every single exercise you do. So sometimes that definitely helped me, anyways.
yeah, I know what you mean. And I think even from like a form perspective, like especially
Oh
squatting,
yeah,
like I am a wonky fella. So if I'm doing a back squat, my symmetry probably isn't perfectly in line. So I need a mirror to see what's
Yeah,
sort of
yeah,
going
yeah.
on, and especially with some of the sort of big movements. But to be fair, on the contrary or the contrary, whatever you would say
yeah,
for that
yeah.
one, like there's a lot of lasses who said, "Oh, I don't like looking at myself," especially in
Oh,
like next to the hack squat and stuff in the corner. So I think for the most part, I do like the big mirrors, but some
I
people
think that's a mentality shift though as well, isn't it? I think because if or even for blokes, or you know yourself, or like if you're training and then you're like, "Oh, I don't like the way I look, and then in 8 months' time or a year's time or 2 years' time, like, you know, where's the mirrors at?
yeah, yeah.
yeah, 100%.
Top off the pump
Yeah.
pose, and that's it's almost like a mentality shift. But I know you mentioned your dietitian and stuff like that. How did you get from being a dietitian in the NHS, from correct, to then want to
Yeah, yeah.
pursue this full
Yeah,
time
I know what
and
you mean because
that's it?
it is a bit of a different avenue compared to sort of like clinical nutrition, as you'd call sort of working with the NHS as a dietitian. So back when I was at uni doing human nutrition and food science, I thought you could be a dietitian off the back end of doing that, but actually had to do a dietitian's undergrad degree. So instead of doing human nutrition and
Yeah.
food science, or do a 2 year masters which I went on to do. And I really wanted to apply nutrition to health. And I previously PT'd at lifestyle, but I just wanted to do something a bit more in detail and in depth. So I thought, gonna go for it, try and do the masters. And I thought, if I don't get onto it, I thought I'll try and do maybe like a small group PT sort of thing.
What's
Yeah.
what's been the biggest? I'll say the word challenge. What's been the biggest challenge? Because obviously not quitting, but leaving your job
Yeah,
to open a gym full time without the guarantee that it's going to
gonna
be
work sort of thing.
here in 12 months' time, where we are fortunately to stand
Yeah,
here
I
in
know what you
the same
mean.
building.
I was absolutely shitting myself, to be fair, especially just before we opened. And then, like, even going from, like, I dropped down to part-time when I worked for the NHS. That'd have been last Christmas.
Wow.
Just to help get this spot ready. Like, I was there 3 days a week because I think if I didn't do that, by the time I drive from mine to Whitehaven, like, there was just literally wasn't enough hours in the day to get it all done and get it. And I think sort of the worst, or not the worst, or the hardest part was probably initially trying to collect the kit because it was all individually bought, and
Yeah.
a lot of it literally was like searching for a couple of months until something would pop up. And then I think probably the couple of months before we opened, when we were getting ready to launch, there was a lot of interest, but you don't really know how much is just people having a look, or is it like guaranteed people are going to train. And I think deep down I was definitely confident that it'd work. Like, I think like strength training's fun. There's more people than ever getting into it, which is really good to see.
Growing, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think like social media is pushing it. I think overall it's definitely a positive on the social media, but I think then there's people training for the wrong reason, maybe just to put a photo on. It's like
Yeah.
if you don't want to do it for yourself, like you don't have to train,
Yeah.
as long as you're doing some sort of exercise in one way or another, it's going to benefit your health. So that might not be in a gym for everyone, but again, for the most part, I think. But yeah, I think challenge wise was initially that's like the gap between leaving the NHS
Yeah.
and then when this place opened on the 17th, it was about like 6, 7, 8 weeks I had
Yeah.
to help get it ready. And then just the risk. But then I think if there wasn't the risk, there probably wouldn't be the reward as
Wouldn't
well
be
at
the
the same
reward.
time, is it?
Of course, no. But I know you're still bodybuilding, or you've had a few over the years. Tell I was kind of peter away from the gym almost and into more about yourself.
Yeah.
There's obviously difficulties and stuff around that. What's been the story behind the bodybuilding, and what
Yeah.
made you want to get into that growing up?
That's a good question, to be fair. If I ever think I first started doing any weight training when I actually lived in Scotland for a year when I was 17. Like I left school, thought I wanted to do engineering, and I thought I don't actually want to go into this. I want to do something more like fitness or like coaching or something to do with movement and exercise. And I used to do a lot of mountain biking, and there was a course in Galashiels in the Scottish borders
Mm.
called Level 2 Sports and Performance in downhill and mountain biking. And people used to coach at Winlass. So I thought, like, love riding my bike. Thought, love downhill. I thought, I could maybe get into this and provide a service and do something that I enjoy. And then when I was doing that course, we did strength and conditioning. Started doing deadlifts and dips, and I thought, this is
Fell in love.
this is way better than riding your bike, I think. And then you don't have to do it in the freezing cold Scottish winter. You can do it in a nice warm gym as well at the same time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Were you always a fit fella growing up, or was it like one of them things where you had to almost get up and force yourself to get in and get the hard work done?
I think I've always been one of them people who like doing something like that. Rugby. Back at
Yeah.
Nelson, we played rugby for Nelson, then we played a little bit for Wicton, and then at the same time, like we'd always be out, like mainly back on bikes, even when I was younger. Before that as well.
So it's always been kind of like, it's not like one of them things where
Yeah,
you've
it's
had
always been
to.
something. I think always been one of them people a bit more proactive on the movement wise. But to be fair, I say like that, like I'm fit. I don't do any fitness hardly. It's
Yeah.
more mainly just resistance training at the moment. And then so I got into the sort of strength training, not necessarily bodybuilding off doing that level 2 sport in down and mountain biking and looking at like the strength and conditioning benefits to that. And I think I just started seeing some changes in my physique, and that really spurred us on to keep going. That's what sort of sucked us in the result. And I suppose it is quite an addictive thing when you start to see results generate, makes you want to do it more. And just like any other areas of life too, I suppose.
Yeah. Obviously, you've been in and around the gym scene for a long time now. What do you think? What do you think is the most? What's the thing that you think people get wrong the most in regards to bodybuilding, gym, and if there's a few things to put it down to?
I think one of maybe the things that people get wrong the most is not maybe choosing a path and sticking to it. Like they'll maybe try something for a week or two and then change it. So it's really hard to basically to tell if something works if you're constantly changing other things. And especially in the in the common scene of social media these days, there's a lot of different opinions and views, and a lot of them conflict.
Yeah.
And I think to go like to put their view forward, a lot of people will say like this is the best way to do it, and I wouldn't say there's the best way. There's always pros and cons to different methods. Same with sort of any industry or any activity, and I think people not choosing a method and sticking to it, because at the end of the day, it comes down to the consistent, hard training with good form and good nutrition. Like there's no shortcuts. But then again, if you're trying to make progress and you're not progressing the most, you will look for these other shortcuts. So I think someone at the start of the journey are a bit more susceptible to maybe fall victim to wanting to always change something or listening to someone else rather than just maybe sticking to a plan, seeing if it works. If not, we'll adjust something, then go from there.
Yeah, well, we spoke about that kind of. We touched on the presence of social media. We kind of touched on one of the first episodes we ever did was, and especially in bodybuilding, is the idea of what other people look like. Therefore, what I can look like. Therefore, I've got to do exactly what he's done, and I'll get to look like him. Oh wait, it's 6 weeks on. Why can't I look like him? So,
It's
what you kind of thoughts on that as well? What social
100%.
media's like?
Yeah, 100%. There's so many variables. I seen there's a bodybuilder I know, I forgot his name off the top of my head,
Yeah.
and he started training because his friend was training to go into the Marines,
Yeah.
and it was spotting. So he'd go to the gym and like spot him, like watch him over his weight, and it'd help him. And he started doing a few sets in between, and he said over that year he ended up growing more than his mate who was training a lot harder, and his mate stopped training after a year because he was like, how the hell have you grown so fast?
Yeah.
So, and at this point, like they were training similar intensity. They both said, yeah, similar diets. There was no drugs involved, no performance enhancing drugs. So that just shows the genetic response to that stimulus has been. One fella's maybe been like a hyper responder, you might call it, and the other fella maybe hasn't responded as well. And you could probably sit you and argue that maybe one trained a bit harder, one had a higher protein diet, but you probably wouldn't have seen them physique changes that are that different, you know.
Yeah.
It's interesting that, like, because you do think like of the people who, I'm not gonna say claim to be or whatever, but people who are natural or say that they're natural and the top of they do put it down to, well, that's just my genetics. And if you look at their son or their dad, more often than not, they're very very similar. Or
100%, yeah. You'll see in the family, like even if like I know a couple of young lads, like they're really in good shape, maybe don't train so much, and then again, like the mother and the father, they'll be in pretty
Yeah,
decent shape as well. So yeah, I think genetics definitely do play a big strong point. But then, as you were saying, mate, also like training experience, like potential drug exposure. Has anyone taken any steroids at all? Like I think they're used a lot in not just in high end sport, but also at amateur levels as well, and throughout lots of different public gyms. And there's probably more people who do take performance enhancing drugs, maybe look like they don't compared to those, who
Yeah.
do. And I think the stereotypical type is massive bodybuilder, maybe 250 pounds, must be taking something. And it probably is because like anabolic steroids are part of bodybuilding at the high end, just like they are with any high performance sport.
What's your kind of thoughts around that?
The S word.
Just steroids and heads.
Yeah, so I think the majority of sort of the bad view they get is due to misuse. So people using them when like they don't understand like the thermodynamics, like the pharmacology of it, or like the actual interactions it has with their physiology and the changes it makes. So they'll take X, Y, and Z, won't really know how to take it properly, and then even before looking at like pharmaceuticals, like is their baseline diet, is it consistent? Is it reaching their nutritional requirements? Are they training? Are they creating the stimulus, to grow that muscle? Are they sleeping well? Like the foundations, what are like hard to do consistently, they're often overlooked by just think, oh, you must be taking X, Y, and Z. But they really don't work unless the foundations are in place. It's like testosterone, like that works by increasing muscle protein synthesis, so how much muscle you can lay down. So if you're not eating the food and creating the stimulus, you're not going to get growth from it as much as you could.
I was going to say that you said about like almost you've got to have to be doing it already before you take them. I think a lot of people, like you said, the misuse, they probably think, well, he got to look like that from this, completely overlooking the rest of the things, and thought, well, I can just do it and not hardly train, but if I train and do that,
Yeah,
I must get massive.
exactly. Like it doesn't matter. Like
it's not necessarily the case.
yeah, 100%. Like before, like 100%, mate. So before like learning to train, they might go and buy, maybe some testosterone, like some Dianabol, like an oral steroid, which I often hear about people taking, rather than like learning the basics, train with good form, good intensity, and then down the line they might wonder like why am I not getting the progress that I might have thought I got, just because you haven't like nailed the basics beforehand. And then like there's the whole like the health perspective. So if you take exogenous testosterone from outside your body, inject it, you stop producing it in your testes because you've turned off the signal between your brain and your testicles. So then, like, if you stop taking something, you're gonna have lower testosterone.
Yeah.
And even when you are taking
Yeah.
testosterone, like it converts to estrogen. So if you take too much, you're at risk of gynecomastia. So you need to think of all these things when when you're getting into it. And if you take it, you might be infertile. You might not be able to have kids. Like, you're going to be at slightly higher risk of heart disease. Blood pressure can go up. So there's so many different parts of your health, I think, that you really need to be aware of and keep an eye on if you are using these things.
Yeah.
And I think the majority probably don't want to talk about it because maybe they might not know too much about what they're taking. And it's just because they might have had some advice at the gym or.
Yeah.
Well,
You're definitely so. I was gonna say you're definitely right with public gyms as well, which is almost scarier in my opinion. You know, people who I'm not gonna say aren't experienced enough to take them, but they think people at the top end do. So therefore, well, why can't I in my local gym? Everyone else is don't know about it, and I think that's where the majority of the uh, the bad. I'm not gonna say side effects because obviously it can happen to anybody, but
I know what you
that's
mean.
where it
the
comes.
Yeah.
stigma
Yeah,
and stuff like
Yeah.
that.
comes off.
100%.
Well, it's also like obviously I think everyone has a very negative perception of it. What's the positives? There obviously is positives for a lot of people, but what is the
Yeah.
positives and the incentives to be doing?
Yeah. So I think the incentive for myself is like I use exogenous testosterone.
Mm.
I think for like the last 4 years, I've used it in small amounts and tried to get the most sort of out the least. And the reason is I want to try and develop my physique quite a lot. And I know I probably didn't reach my natural limit, but I'd like to take it further at the same time, being very cautious of health. Can you
Yeah.
repeat a question? I've already forgot what you said now, Luke.
I just put like kind
The
of obviously
positives.
positives.
Yeah, the
What are
positives, yeah. So I think if you're looking at like health wise positive, like the main one would be if you had low testosterone,
Yeah.
potentially bringing in some, but that'd be more as sort of testosterone replacement therapy. So it wouldn't be putting it above where it'd be naturally. So like your normal testosterone range for a male is like 9 to 29 roughly. So average person will probably be somewhere, on that scale.
on that scale, yeah.
And if you've got like hypogonadism, which is like classed as clinically low testosterone, like there's various treatment methods, but one of them would be like TRT. So you take exogenous testosterone to try and replicate what your testes would.
Mm.
And then, so obviously that would be, and if you've got low test, you could be at like the risk of like losing muscle mass, losing bone density, even like overall mood, motivation, how you feel, like sex drive. So obviously low test is dangerous, but then also when you surpass the normal range, you come into sort of super physiological dosages, and that's when obviously problems can happen. And normally it is in a dose response fashion. So the more you take, the more risk that it's gonna hold as well. And it's like if you think of testosterone itself, it's got like a cholesterol backbone, the structure of it. So when you metabolize testosterone, that cholesterol backbone will go free circulating into your blood and then increase your blood cholesterol. But then also can eat in like a diet high in saturated fat. So at the same time, you just need to be aware of what could increase cholesterol, maybe monitor it because that's a heart disease risk, and maybe at the same time taking some health supplements to help control it as well.
Yeah, imagine if you were dirty bulking and taking at the same time. You just
Exactly. So
your
100%.
cholesterol would be,
So if you've taken a lot of testosterone,
don't want those every
a lot of
day.
saturated fat, cholesterol is going to get hammering.
Yeah, I just
And
thought that. Yeah,
yeah, so 100%. So it's definitely not a good thing to have. And then that's when sort of like estrogen can come into play. So like an old school method is taking like a drug. If estrogen's too high, I'll take this to lower it. But rather than doing that, you're probably just better off not using that much testosterone.
Yeah.
Because a lot of the drugs that you can use to reduce estrogen, called aromatase inhibitors, they basically prevent
yeah,
testosterone converted to estrogen. A lot of these are not good on your cholesterol. So that's going to have another
Yeah.
unfavorable
Massive
effect
one.
on your cholesterol. Exactly. So, and then you've also got genetics to your cholesterol genetics to consider, because a lot of people, despite having like a diet low in saturated fat, being pretty lean, not even using anabolic steroids, their cholesterol might be a little more elevated,
bottom weight.
especially if like African, that as well. That can be a risk factor for it.
Yeah.
So you've got all these different variables what can affect your cholesterol. So you do, and that's just one little part of it. So you do really need to keep a close eye on what's going on.
Yeah.
It's not like you've got to be educated as well. Obviously, like yourself, you know your stuff. So therefore, like to say that can use them in the right way.
You know what's going into your body.
Yeah,
You know
exactly. Where
exactly
it's
what
not
it's
a
going
thought.
to do and
Yeah,
exactly how it's
exactly.
going to
Yeah,
affect
and
you.
yeah,
Not
exactly.
a
So
thought to it.
it's known what to look out for. Like for one example would be like I normally try and get like farmer grade testosterone, so you know exactly where it's come from. And then one day I couldn't, and I took it for 4 to 5 weeks. I was at this point I was doing like testosterone replacement therapy in between like two smallish cycles, and I just felt horrendous. Like mood was crap. I just felt very low. Got my bloods done, and my testosterone, I think it was like 3 or 4 nanomole, like it wasn't even testosterone that I was getting. And if you get your bloods done, you know what's going on. Like I
Yeah.
was actually quite pleased that it was low because now I know I feel like shit. You know what I
Okay.
mean? But then if some lads, like 90% of people do, probably even more, who take anabolics, if they don't get their bloods done and they feel crap, they're like, why do I feel crap? And if they don't understand what's going on, they can maybe blame it on something else, and it can have a lot of stress on
Yeah,
relationships, on families,
Oh,
even work, like general day-to-day life. So like hormones and like endocrinology, it can have it's very impactful. So you've just got to be really careful of what you're doing and tread very carefully, and definitely not taking anything that you don't know what it does or don't understand the consequences and how to potentially combat them.
Yeah. I was gonna say an awful lot there, Joe, as well. To trying to kind of fathom it. Definitely, like you say, back to the positives you said, and I was going to go back to when you said about kind of you thought you'd maybe reached your peak. You
Or
maybe could have maybe went a little
yeah,
bit
I think I definitely could have been a lot more consistent
yeah,
with diet back when I was natural,
right.
and even more training to get definitely to reach some more growth, and then
Before
yeah,
you
exactly,
get
before
pushing
starting to
on.
use anabolics. And then if your baseline muscle mass is high as possible point, you're going to be in an even better place, aren't you, for when you
Obviously,
do
when you
start? Yeah,
something a bit of a
100%.
bumper is when you get to where you
yeah,
possibly can.
Yeah,
It's
so it's
like
going to
if I wanted
increase
to
that.
reach anywhere, and that's probably why the top bodybuilders, they are in such a good shape because they've probably got to where the max they possibly can be, and then went right. Okay, well, gonna go even further.
Yeah,
We're in a bit of a silly one.
100%. And it's even thinking of like sports as well. Like there's a steroid called T-ball.
Right.
One called there's an oral steroid called D-ball, and there's another one called T-ball. It's slightly similar, and I think it was like synthesized in a German lab in the 1960s. And they give it to the Olympic swimming team, and they were all jacked, and they did well.
Yeah.
I'm not too sure on their positionings. And from then on, it was banned. So just a lot of people from the outside, I think, they just associate like anabolic
Yeah.
use with huge bodybuilders,
Yeah.
but at the same time, it goes on a lot within
We
professional
spoke
sport
about
from
yeah.
fighters. And I think like in America, there's a big track history of baseball players as well using
Yeah.
testosterone as a
I was
performance
gonna say
enhancer.
NFL as well. I was gonna
Yeah,
say
and
big
100, yeah.
football.
Yeah, so definitely big in that scene as well. And I think now, like we think we mentioned before or the other day, Luke, like about testing methods, there's a lot of scientists, doctors, people know how to sort of to swerve and sort of eliminate the testing. And I think it's a bit of a weird one because everyone knows like performance enhancing drugs are used in high end sport.
yeah,
Even looking at like pool and like beta blockers and stuff like that to
Yeah, I
slow
was
your
gonna
heart
say.
rate down, yeah. Not been an anabolic steroid, but still been like a performance enhancing drug. And I think uh, I've recently seen as well on Instagram. There was actually like it was called the something games, but it was like an untested.
I was
Have you, is that
that
what you're
was my
gonna?
silly one. I was gonna say, would you like to see? And I've always said it, and it's ridiculous, but 100 meters where they're allowed to take whatever they want when they want, and someone runs it in 2 seconds and explodes at the end. But you know what I mean? Like a proper kind of,
Yeah,
there is. You are right. That's into
yeah,
probably a similar post,
yeah,
but
100%. So it's
there is
like
games where
it'll just allow them to basically do what they want without trying to have to sort of cover their own back.
oh yeah,
yeah,
And I think I do know like the people who run these federations
yeah,
and then bodies. Obviously, there is a positive incentive. Like they do want to help protect people's health because of the misuse, but then also a lot of people are going to take it regardless because a lot of athletes will do whatever they can
yeah.
to
To
try
get
and get
that
to the top.
competitive edge, yeah,
So I think meeting them somewhere in the middle and then like providing education of how to do things,
yeah,
safer, providing testing so you can, monitor health,
yeah,
maybe blood work, maybe like a cardio echogram of your heart or like a calcium score so you can, sort of estimate if you've got any heart disease going on.
yeah.
So I
Do it
think
safely. Almost. Yeah,
100%. So it's yeah, just watching your parameters. And I do firmly believe like using low dose anabolics, sort of cautionately, and at the same time monitoring your health can have less impact overall compared to eating like a Western diet full of saturated,
Mhm.
processed food,
Yeah.
drinking on the weekend, and doing God knows what at the same
Yeah.
time.
Yeah.
No, I'm gonna come back to the whole steroid conversation in a minute, but I just want to know your thoughts on Ozempic and stuff like that, because I know that's kind of been quite big,
Yeah.
Yeah.
big in the last year or so. It's kind of come through. I know
Yeah,
James Smith has spoke about it quite a bit.
I think that's an interesting one because like Ozempic is like it's called a GLP-1 drug. So they're called incretin hormones, and your gut makes them after you eat a meal, normally when you're full, to show right, don't eat any more food. I've had enough. So when we inject them, it just basically persists the feeling of hunger, and they also create your pancreas to make a bit more to release a bit more insulin, so that can help bring your blood sugar down a little bit as well at the same time. And they've been used for the past couple of decades in type 2 diabetes. Because you know, type 2 diabetes, it's basically a symptom of being overweight for a long time, and your body just can't use the glucose that's been broken down from carbohydrates,
Yeah.
and you become resistant to it. And insulin, you release more insulin, try and get the sugar from your blood into your cells, but it just doesn't work. So they've been used primarily in that sort of patient group, if you like, but now they've entered like sort of mainstream fat loss.
Yeah.
And to put in a nutshell overall, I'd probably say I think they're good for people who are going to probably negatively impact their health for like failing to lose weight or due to the weight. But for the average person who wants to lose some weight, who's not morbidly obese,
Yeah.
it's definitely not the right way to look at it. And I think the misuse comes in where like diet's not scrutinized first. I haven't tried to learn about food, learn about the composition of food, maybe learn about energy balance and how to lose weight, or learn about training. It's like, oh, so and so's. It's like
Yeah.
Sandra down the gym has had this pen for 2 weeks and she's lost 7 pounds. She's only been eating soup and half a bread roll twice a day, but like, and that's the sort of like narrative
Yeah.
you often hear behind it. It's not people who really want to,
No.
really want to try. So I think it's used often as a bit of a band-aid. And I suppose, and it is working in a way because it does reduce appetite, so it reduces intake. But then, it can be at slightly higher risk of losing some muscle mass if you're not eating
Yeah.
much. And then I haven't actually looked into the long-term studies, to be honest, but I did see some cases of like pancreatitis, so like inflammation of the pancreas. Not too sure if that was like cause and effect or just due to that population group already being more overweight and at higher risk of pancreatitis. But yeah, I think overall, I think for people who really need them for patients, like I've seen a gentleman over 350 kilo before, and I think obviously for him, he was at a road. He tried every intervention, and it was a lot of like obviously psychological eating, comfort eating, which often is when it comes to food. And I think for him, I think it worked very well. It's allowed him to reduce his intake, and the risk of Ozempic is nothing compared to the risk of his current health
Current
status
health state, yeah.
due to mainly his weight. Yeah, exactly. But then there might be a lady who's like maybe not even overweight at all. Maybe she thinks she is. She's not overweight. Maybe wants to lose a stone to tighten up.
Put a couple of pounds on over Christmas. And
Exactly, and she's using this, and then at the same time, it's not needed for
Yeah.
the job at all.
I think it's almost similar to what we touched on at the start, and is people turn to that before they turn to, you know, diet things
Yeah.
like, going on a run.
Cutting corners, it's
exactly.
Yeah,
I think very almost petering off here. It's almost like similar to short attention spans and stuff like that. People not having the patience and willpower to actually just sit there and get up, go to the gym every day, not eat that but eat this, train at that time and not at that
Everyone
time.
wants it yesterday, don't they? I think that's the kind of,
yeah.
in a nutshell, everyone wants everything yesterday.
Yeah, you're
It's
right. Like, I think it's a common sort of agenda now, isn't it? And a common
Nowadays, it's-
thought among many things within life in this sort of day and age, isn't it?
But sorry, you'll know yourself with PT and obviously in coaching for a long time. How many people have probably came to you and been like, "Oh, I've just booked all day IB for in 6 months.
Yeah.
I want to really get how do I get
It
this?
is
How do I get
ready.
that?" Like,
Yeah,
that's a
and
genuine
it's like
thing.
and it's like unrealistic expectations, isn't it? Like I think people do have unrealistic expectations, and that's when they'll look elsewhere to try and generate the result. And so I think overall, I think definitely got clinical application in people who really struggle with bringing the weight and the blood glucose down, like that gentleman who was of a sort of 350 kilos. But at the same time, I think now the main sort of cohort using it is probably it's people who don't necessarily need it.
Yeah.
Like when I worked as a dietitian at Whitehaven, there was a shortage. I forgot what brand name it was of the drug, but there was a shortage for the type 2 diabetes because I think the company was also selling it elsewhere.
All right. Okay.
Mm,
And even like from a cost perspective as well, I think it's like, is it 70, 80, 90 quid? Is that I think I've totally forgot. Is it a month or a week in Boots? But it's still,
right.
it's a
It's
significant amount of
extortionate.
money, isn't
That's
it?
a
Yeah.
lot.
And like you could spend that on food, you could spend it on, like gym membership.
Gym membership, food, and it's like
Yeah.
it's a lot that way.
I was gonna say, I've cut you off again.
No.
I was gonna say about funny enough, actually in America, I wonder if it's used quite a bit in America, just with obviously healthcare there, and actually got family members who like subscriptions, not of that, but of like supplements, things like that. Who they come every month, and it's that they come in the sachets and things like that. I just wondered if it was maybe something.
Yeah, that's interesting, and I think like looking at like different healthcare across the world as
Yeah,
well. I seen a video.
pharmaceuticals.
Yeah, I seen a video the other day. There was a fella in Boots, and he was saying he can get a vitamin D blood test in Boots, and I thought that's really good because there's many times when I worked as a dietitian, and I'd email a GP saying, "Oh, can you just test this patient's vitamin D?" I won't hear anything back.
Mm,
Or they just, and previous to that, they would never probably do it off their own back. There'd be the odd anomaly. But like vitamin D, it's if you've got low vitamin D, you can't absorb calcium for your bones. Vitamin D, it's associated with immune function. You need it for parathyroid hormone behind your neck to regulate calcium. So it's used in lots and lots of different roles. And the fact is that you can't even get it tested at your GP through a simple blood test. And the fact is, most of the UK, and we'll say most, over about 40 to 50% of the UK has suboptimal vitamin D
yeah,
levels. So that should be, should be enough to help try and optimize it. But I think the sad reality is of the NHS at the moment is it's more of keeping people alive than about health
Yeah.
optimization, sadly.
Yeah.
And that was one of the reasons I wanted to come into the private sector. I've
Yeah.
been very spread across patients,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
one part of us, I thought I do want to stay and try and have more of a positive impact. But like I'm not having enough time with patients to actually, get into it and learn about them and actually make a difference. And since it was more numbers and quantity over quality, I've just thought this didn't sit right with us, to be honest, really.
How did I'm gonna go back onto the you meant when we talk about unrealistic expectations. How with you PTing and coaching, how do you manage those people with those unrealistic expectations?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. I think depending on the person, it'll be sort of how they take it, and how they word it. And I think a good way to do it is sort of break things down and maybe do a bit of a time frame. So you can say, right, in 6 months, it's probably a realistic goal that we can lose maybe like 25, maybe £30 at this point. And then maybe from there we can maybe try and gain maybe at like £1 to £2 a month over 6 months, or we'll gain for maybe 10 to 12. So I think breaking it down so they can look at the bigger picture and see how it all connects has quite a big impact, because I think sometimes, as you say, you just want to get to that end goal
Yeah.
almost straight away, and you think of like we've got all these weeks ahead, just to help sort of understand it from a distance almost. But no, I think it's and especially with social media, it's the unrealistic
Yeah.
look. And I think even like a lot of coaches, and I've probably thought it myself, I think I'll post this photo because I'm a lot leaner, but I'm like, it's not the it's not the realization of what's going on now.
Yeah.
So I've definitely thought a few times, thought, nah, I'm not going to do that. It's not me.
I know we mentioned social media almost right at the beginning. When you come to PTing and posting videos online, is there almost like that voice in the back of your head thinking, "Oh, I want to make sure this is definitely like 100% right," because you've seen other people saying, Eddie Abu saying this one thing, Ronnie Coleman saying this, whoever's saying this, everyone's saying different things.
Uninformed
So
people as well.
yeah,
People who
like
aren't, who aren't educated,
even
saying
like
this.
the people with the big following, and then you put your voice out there. You own the gym; they're all using your gym. It's like,
Yeah, I
what's
think
your
it's
thoughts around that?
I think any sort of educational video I'll do, I'll always make sure I'm not almost like 100% based on some very strong evidence. And I think with nutrition as well, like it often depends of the context of nutrition. So like just because someone says, "Oh, I removed this food and it's improved my stomach," doesn't mean for everyone else it's going to work as well. So a lot of the time, like there's so many different contributing factors to food. There's like how you're brought up, the environment, what food you got access to, what your mum and dad ate, what you had at school. like what so and so, like this religion, even like there's
Yeah.
so many factors depending where you're from with food. So I think that has a big impact on what people want to say, and like they get like sort of like not emotionally attached, but like they want to say it because everyone eats food. Everyone
Yeah.
does it.
Yeah.
One of them things. So I think it can be quite hard. And with like Eddie Eddie on Instagram and various people like that, I think a lot of them just want to try and post more controversial videos
Oh,
to get more
Yeah.
clout, isn't it, and
no,
get the
exactly.
views. And I think that like that's the whole social media sort of
Gig.
gig at the moment, isn't it? It's same in the PT world. There's
Mm-hmm.
like one lad the other day saying he put a video on admitting that it just used like an audio hook, he called it, saying bent over rows. Uh, and what was it? I forgot what the exact wording was, but basically saying you need to ditch the bent over rows if you want to build a thick back. And then afterwards he came back and saying it was a hook, but I was just like, you're truly contradicting
It's out
yourself
there.
if you.
It's
I
out, it's
Yeah,
out there,
yeah.
exactly. And you
especially
put it out.
nowadays.
Yeah,
I think
statement you've
yeah.
released
Well,
is what, isn't
When I
it?
was doing a lot of research into business and social media myself, I know one of the most important things this day and age is the first 3 to 5 seconds of any video you post, because that's what captures your
Getting them.
attention.
Yeah, 100%. And I think I've watched quite a few slower videos, and you can literally see yourself scrolling past it before you've
Yeah.
Yeah.
it's hooked, hasn't it, for sure.
If he comes out straight away saying, something ridiculous straight away,
What's going on?
straight in the
Yeah,
comments, everyone, and he's like, well, why is this,
exactly. I think all
probably
the
giving him screen time at the end of the day as well. That's sounding,
exactly, and it's still getting views even if it's not liked. And I think the controversial information or whatever it is, a video or a post, it always goes a lot further because you've got people in the comments going opposite ways, haven't you? And everyone's wanting to put their sort
Yeah.
of view across. If everyone agreed, it'd just be, oh, that's fine and gets past. What's the next thing we can?
Yeah. Debatable. Now, going in regards to the weight and things like that, do you think it's harder or more difficult? This is obviously, it's going to be subjective, but it's obviously not black and white. Is it harder to go from overweight to lean, or is it harder to go from like skinny to lean, or like whatever you want to call
I'm
it?
probably going to give you a boring answer here, sadly, and say it just depends on the context of that
Yeah.
person. Because some people will find it harder to gain weight, some people will find it easier to gain weight. Some people will naturally have a higher appetite, different activity levels, and then there's also like the genetic component of it as well. Like we do have different rate of metabolism,
Yeah.
but different lifestyles, more sedentary, more active. And I think when it comes to overall, I think if you wanted to develop your physique to be, say, 250 pounds, 300 pounds, you could argue that'd be harder because you'd have to eat a lot more food
Yeah.
than somebody who wouldn't. But then the person who's already 250 pounds, maybe not muscular, but maybe just carrying more body fat, and they want to get down, they'd probably argue that they can't not eat the food as well. So
Yeah.
I think it always just depends on the
Yeah.
context and the situation you're in yourself. I
From
know I know from both points it can be a hard one for sure.
yeah, from like a dietitian's perspective, regardless of the context and stuff like that, because I know it's quite hard with this question I'm about to ask. Do you think it's? I've completely lost my word in here.
It's all right. So I'm about being a dietitian, and then I'm gonna potentially about fat loss or muscle gain.
Yeah, yeah. Sorry, that's what the question was. Is there an optimal way from a dietitian perspective, regardless of wanting to be big or what you're doing for work? Things like that, is there an optimal way for people to be, regardless if you lift every day
Yeah,
or if you have an office
yeah.
job?
I think it's a very interesting question because there's probably not really a direct answer to it. So I think when I worked I suppose in the eyes of a dietitian, like going back to working at Whitehaven Hospital, we'd have like sort of ideal body weights for patients, but you always take them with a pinch of salt.
Yeah.
And like BMI gets a lot of stick on the internet, a
Mm.
bit like body mass
Yeah,
index.
yeah,
So it's obviously an equation with your height and your weight, and people say like, oh, it shouldn't be used, but it's not used to make in-depth decisions, really, to be honest. It's used as a rough indicator to see if someone is a healthy body weight or if they're mainly underweight or overweight. It's just first thing you might
It's a
glance at.
guide, yeah.
Yeah, a bit of a guide, and especially like with the older population. So older population, they don't tend to train compared to the younger one or do any sort of sport. And we know if you train, if you do any sort of sport, increase your muscle mass, it's probably going to say you're overweight or obese, despite being not. Which is, it's completely fine. It's just used as a rough scale for typically the untrained individual. And like with the older population, since most of them don't train, it can be quite good to sort of like to see if someone's potentially underweight, undernourished, and are suffering from malnutrition. So that was one of the main like applications I used it for when I was working as a dietitian. And with BMI, they're taking us back here. It's been a few months. I think the healthy range is 17, it's 17.5 to that's too low. Is it 20 or 20 to 25 roughly? This is how I don't use it at all
No.
now I've left, to be honest. So you'd look to see if patient was in the healthy range, and you'd basically adjust their weight, and I'd always go for the top end of the highest healthy weight that you could get away with. And then again, like I'd be more bothered about looking at, overall body composition. Like, are they happy with their weight? Is like how's metabolism? Is like cholesterol off? Is like his blood glucose
Yeah.
is well controlled? So I'm looking at health markers at a total rather than using body weight. But it's definitely a good indicator. And if you're carrying more body fat, your metabolism probably isn't going to be as good. Your
Yeah.
cholesterol's going to be a bit higher. Your blood glucose probably going to be a little bit higher. You're not going to be as efficient. Like if you have a load of saturated fat, it's probably going to come down that fast. If you have a big dose of sugar, it's probably not going to come down that fast either.
Yeah.
But like someone, fit and healthy like yourself, you have like a load of sugar, your pancreas is going to release insulin, and your blood sugar is going to come down, probably pretty fast compared to someone who's not.
Yeah. We'd almost touching back on steroids and peds and stuff like that. As a PT, kind of two questions here. Would you ever be promoting them or advising people without being asked about them? And also, if there was an ideal stack or whatever you want to call it, or kind of whatever the phrasing is around using peds, what would be the go-to?
So I'd never encourage like performance enhancing drug use at all. I think I've had a good five or 10 conversations in here with young lads saying, I'm thinking of doing this. And I'll always highlight all the negative potential consequences.
Yeah.
We did
Which-
here before we even touched
Yeah.
on the negatives.
Yeah, so always highlight the negative consequences and sort of like how much of a like you can't just take it and leave it. It's a consistent
Yeah.
thing that you're gonna have to do for long term probably, and especially if you're doing it for muscle building. So yeah, definitely wouldn't encourage the use of it at all. And if I ever see or hear a coach encouraging like a individual to take not even an anabolic steroid, maybe like a fat burner like clenbuterol or like
Yeah.
T3, like they should not be your coach if they're encouraging the use of pharmaceuticals.
Yeah.
When we know, like for the typical lifestyle client, like nutrition and training
Yeah.
is absolutely everything. And then same with like what I mentioned before with pharmaceuticals, they do help, but you've got to have the basics laid down beforehand.
Yeah.
And I always highlight all the negatives that can potentially happen, but then you'll have some people who are going to use stuff regardless.
Regardless of the.
Yeah, regardless, yeah. So, and then when you think of like, if you think of like say testosterone, I was saying before, your normal range is about 9 to 29, and like testosterone typically comes in like a solution, it's all being oil, and then it normally be about 250 milligrams or 300 milligrams per mil of oil. And people talk about it in like total volume, so that like how many mil should it take or have it taken, or who said this, and like, but it doesn't matter about the overall volume, it's the concentration of what's in it.
Yeah.
Oh, exactly.
It's like saying, I've had a 500 mil monster, but it just matters how much sort of caffeine's
Caffeine's in it,
inside
yeah.
it, yeah. And when I was natural, my testosterone was 27, so it was pretty high on the natural range, but that wasn't my free testosterone. So you've got free testosterone, what can bind to your androgen receptors, and then you've got bound as well, and it binds to something called, bit of a long word, it's SHGB, or sex hormone binding globulin, just a protein that attaches to your testosterone, to your estrogen, stops it basically interacting with your cells, because your body thinks I've got enough, don't need anymore, so it binds to that. So my like free overall test was about halfway. And then when I did my first cycle, I used 250 milligrams of testosterone a week. That was it. And my testosterone went from 27 to I think it was 73 when I got my bloods done. So it basically 2.5 times my natural testosterone. And a lot of people said, "Oh, that's too low. Like you're not even going to get any benefit from that at all." Like granted, I didn't grow loads or gain loads of strength, but definitely noticed a good amount from it. And I got bloods done beforehand, and then I got bloods done at the end of the cycle, and they barely moved. And I do know bloods are only insight into metabolism,
that's
so it doesn't give you the full picture, but it gives you a good insight of, what's sort of going on
Going
at the
on,
moment
yeah.
in time.
Mm.
So yeah, I think, and then from there, it's just been a case of slowly tapering up or escalating up each time, just a small amount more to try and wreak some progress from it
Yeah.
without using a large amount at once by any means. But yeah, I think a lot of lads who will think about taking that might be going for a holiday or going traveling, and it's thinking like, right, after this, what's my plans? Do I want to come off completely? Especially after they understand like it shuts down the normal production. So like these effects are long lasting, and like I was saying, they can have a big impact on your health, how you feel, relationships, and your whole life. So I
Yeah.
think it's very important that you do it from like sort of a bit of an educated view, if you like, understand what's going on, because I think you can put yourself into quite a state. When I worked at Whitehaven Hospital, he just reminded us of a point. A lad came in and he was in intensive care, and everyone said it was due to steroids, and I was like, I couldn't really see the relationship, but it turned out he took insulin.
Right.
So
Okay.
insulin lowers your blood
Yeah.
glucose. It takes it from your blood into your cells, and he took way too much insulin, and I think he got his blood glucose tested. It was like 0 point something. I was like, crikey! I was like, literally, he could have like given himself brain damage, killed himself. And again, this is from the misuse of it. Someone taking something, not knowing how it works, and he's nearly killed himself from insulin. And it's used in diabetes,
Yeah,
and
exactly.
Yeah.
it literally it keeps people alive because it stops the blood glucose going
Yeah. Yeah.
too
Yeah.
high. It's a good thing for health when it comes to that, but the misuse of it, it's nearly seeing the lad
Yeah.
off.
Yeah.
I'm going to try and maybe something for the last point almost. Do you think there's ever any correlation between money and gym growth, if you like, um, personal growth, anything like that? I don't know. I just kind of thought off the top of my head.
As in, like, sort of having the availability.
Yeah, like if I think of going back to social media, a lot of people, top end equipment obviously comes into it. Accessibility to, where I go, there's a swimming pool. So even after that, you're just going in there,
Yeah.
like a steam room. Even after that, lucky enough to be in a position where that is the case. But do you think that is detrimental? If you're less fortunate
Yeah.
and you are just lifting. I'm not saying lifting wood,
I
but
know what you
we're
mean,
talking about
but yeah.
different ends of the scale
Yeah,
almost.
I think like if you've got them sort of benefits, like if you've got maybe a sauna, cold
Yeah.
plunge, swimming pool, it can be a bit more enticing to pull people in, I suppose.
Yeah.
I know what you mean. I think it's a good question. I think for me personally, I wouldn't like a swimming pool. I'd
No.
prefer to go to like a concrete gym with like metal, and I quite like the sort of raw
Yeah,
feel to it. And I think
yeah, yeah.
that's
rustic
what,
format.
yeah.
Yeah.
Like if I go
I
to
mean,
a hotel gym, I just want to have a lie down on a comfy mat. It doesn't really give us a
yeah, yeah,
incentive
yeah.
to really want to train. And I think if people have stuff like that, they almost sometimes avoid the actual hard training,
Yeah,
and they'll use it as a bit of like
Yeah.
oh,
I do agree.
I'm going like I'll go in the pool and I'll go on this and I'll do that, and it's like are you just like replacing like the actual work that you maybe should be
Yeah,
doing
with
with
comfort almost.
yeah, 100
Something they're
100%.
used to, something that they know they can do.
Yeah,
I, I'm almost in the hard, like in the almost concrete gym kind of mentality. Whereas I've had a lot of people judge me for not listening to music at all, whether it's running, gym, exercising. I always
that's a skill to
say
Luke.
that
That's
I
a skill
don't.
to that, Luke.
I try not to use my phone as much, and I won't
Yeah,
listen to music because I think it's probably David Goggins and as well as Joe Rogan, and Chris Williamson. I think that's all been said on their kind of podcast when they've had each other on, and they've said it's like when you take the music off, let's see what you can do when the going gets tough.
I know what you mean.
Yeah.
Like it's sort of like a psychological reliant sort of thing, isn't
Yeah.
it? Yeah. And I think myself, I've been bad for this in the past. Like I'm like, oh, I need this song to time at a
Yeah, well,
certain
definitely a
time when I'm on
run.
the leg press.
Definitely a run for me. Like even a beat can make a difference for
Yeah,
me. Or like yeah, I know exactly what you mean.
yeah,
Almost
like
you sit
waiting.
and you wait for like a drop, and then you're like, right. I
Yeah,
personally, I think it's almost a bit of a stimulant too. But I can
yeah,
definitely see where you're coming
yeah.
from.
I think 100% agree where you're coming from. I think I was exactly the same. I was like, it stimulates a bit of oomph and a bit of like, yes, right, time to get some intensity
Yeah,
turned
exactly.
up. And then I think if you do take it away, you're surprised how
Yeah.
you don't
Yeah.
actually need it.
Yeah.
And then you just become reliant on it and you think, why was I like
Mm.
timing everything perfectly to this song when I didn't really need to do it in the first place.
It's like the people who say like, oh, I've lost my headphones. I can't run without my headphones. I can't
Yeah,
use my headphones. Like, oh, I've left my bloody headphones at the gym and at home. It's 15 minutes. So I'm not going back. It's like, oh, what am I going to do?
It's like oh, I forgot my Apple Watch. It doesn't count today's session.
Yeah. Yeah.
He's on his all right.
freaking lots of heart rate saying out.
But start when you come through the gym door. So.
Yeah. Well, I'm trying to think. Time scores on the doors. 52.
What's for tea tonight? Like lads, out tasty.
I don't
No.
actually know. We're going for drinks, aren't we? So
Oh,
we're
yeah.
going
Got
for
some drinks.
Liquid lunch.
So, yes.
Liquid tea, should I say?
Yeah. So we've had an insight into science and all the rest, and then we're just going to have a few alcoholic beverages and just.
I don't blame you, lads.
Just 1 minute.
No, definitely. No, I think the last point I was actually going to mention, you obviously mentioned about money and stuff like that. What's your thoughts on, because I was quite big into listening to Andrew Huberman and his kind of stuff. And that's almost what this podcast is kind of reminding me of today, is almost sitting listening to him speak.
Yeah.
What's your thoughts on...
Cheers, man.
No, it's true though, like the science
Yeah.
stuff like that. What's your thoughts on the ice baths and the saunas and stuff like that? And do you think it wouldn't matter regardless? Obviously, what's your thoughts on that kind of thing?
I think it's a very good question. You know, the UFC president, Dana White,
Dana White, yeah.
he's been getting help off a fella called
Yeah.
Gary Brecker.
Yeah.
I've seen
I watched a little bit of one of his first videos and I thought, mate, he seemed fairly clued up, this fella. And then I seen a video that he was doing a conference and he was saying you can literally turn off the fat burning switch. And I was like, mate, it's metabolism. You can't just turn it off. Like, it's always happening. The rates will change. You know, you'll burn, when your heart rate's up, you'll burn more carbs and more fat, but you're constantly burning both of them together. I was like, that's not right. So I thought I'd have a look into his stuff. And then I seen he'd worked a lot with Dana, and Dana was on a video preaching the importance of this grounding mat, this red light therapy, saying that it's helped stop his sleep apnea, he feels better. But he forgot to mention that he'd changed his diet, lost weight, started strength training, and then a lot of it was like cold plunge, sauna. And there is a lot of information to show how beneficial saunas are.
I've seen
They can mimic like cardiovascular activity, so they can help reduce, blood pressure, rest and heart rate. And I think I've heard like someone on Rogan mention like heat shock proteins that can be quite protective as well. So yeah, I think the benefits of a sauna, I think there's more than sort of cold plunge. And I think with cold plunge, I think it looked a couple of years ago, there was some information or evidence, should I say, that it did reduce some inflammatory markers. And I think for cold plunge, it just depends when you do it as well, because you don't really want to do it after you train. Because
it's the dopamine effect, isn't it? Because it's obviously, I think it's 2.5 times as your dopamine, or around about that. It does the same, if not more, than cocaine or more than sexual intercourse. So it's obviously a proven
contact injury. No, contact sport as well. I'm trying to think. What you think about, like, I think maybe, again, don't want to speak if I'm not informed, but I think maybe like bruising and things like that, you can reduce that as well.
Yeah, because I suppose when you jump in, all the blood goes to your core, doesn't it? And when you get out, it rushes your peripheral, so it can deliver, nutrients in your blood and whatnot to help repair. And then when it comes to cold, it's like you don't really want to do it after the gym because you want the blood to go to your peripherals if you train somewhere to help them repair. But then I think with cold plunge, I think it's really good from a psychological aspect.
Yes.
Like, I think you feel great. Like, it helps reset the mindset. And I think for myself, I think that's probably the biggest benefit from it psychologically. And I think that's a good enough benefit to do it. I don't do it myself personally, but I do think, it's
the
that
incentives
alone.
there. I think the last question I'm going to ask you, because speaking on Dana White, he obviously has just done that. I think it was in 96 hours or however many hours, water fast. I don't know if your thoughts on kind of the water fasting and completely just not cutting out water for that long time.
So he just had water, did he, for that amount of time, was it?
No, did he cut it out, or did he just was it just water? I
hope he had water at least.
I think he had he cut out completely, I'm sure that's what he called it. He called it
water fast.
Yeah, I think he completely takes water
Was
out.
it not like the first 24 hours you do without, and then you gradually have like electrolytes, and you kind of like, and then by the end you
dehydrate himself, doesn't he? And then fires loads of electrolytes into himself. And
definitely not a good thing to dehydrate yourself and then rehydrate in a fast manner. Because when you dehydrate yourself, everything in your blood comes more concentrated. Because a lot of your blood is water. So like all your blood markers will go up, because there's less volume there.
It's survival, isn't it, as well?
Yeah,
Oh,
so
yeah.
it's definitely not a good, definitely not a good thing to do. And then when it comes to fasting, probably nearly all of the benefits are simply due to having a calorie restricted diet. So
Yeah.
basically, even controlling calories. So it's not some magic that goes on.
Yeah.
Like there's a lot of people saying it cleans out your cells, and like is it autography or autophagy when they say like it resets the mitochondria in your cells, like where you oxidize food to create energy. One of the main thing is just from being in a calorie deficit, typically eating
Yeah.
better. And I think people do feel better because you might like cognitively, you might feel a bit sharper in the morning if you don't eat
Yeah.
first thing. But then it also like depends on your job. If you're a builder, throwing bricks about
Yeah.
and blocks, you can't fast in the morning probably.
Yeah.
You'll be on your
No,
ass with
no.
low blood sugar by dinner
Yeah.
time. So I think again it just depends on the context, but there's no special benefits to fasting, to be honest. It generally comes down to just controlling them calories.
Yeah.
But a lot of influencers and various people on the internet will promote fasting as this special tool.
Yeah.
And I think it just depends on appetite levels. I'll use it for individuals who might be more sedentary, not very hungry in the morning. So I was like, great, well, just, backload a lot of your food to later in the day when you're hungrier. It just
Yeah.
matches you better.
Yeah.
But then other people are like, oh, I like having a big breakfast. That fits them better. So some individuals, I think, yeah. And then with like doing a 3 or 4 day fast, I think again, mentally, you might feel, really sharp. You won't feel lethargic. Like have to have a big meal by any means, will you?
Yeah. Yeah.
So I
Food's
think, mentally, but just imagine the one afterwards. So,
No Sunday dinner waiting for me.
so I think yeah, mentally the benefits, but again, like if you put no nutrients in your body for 4 days, so
It's a long day. It's not a long day, but
yeah,
it's a long day. But it's
yeah.
a long time.
And I
Yeah.
think if you just focused on overall, but it's a boring answer again, which people don't want to hear. Like overall, a well balanced diet, lots of
Yeah.
nutrients dense single foods, and if you're overweight, coming into a deficit to maintain a healthy weight.
Yeah.
Like rather than maybe being a bit overweight, doing a 4 day fast, and then
Yeah.
again, it comes into sort of like the relation to like yo-yo dieting almost,
Yeah.
like an extreme measure.
Yeah.
That's just probably not necessary. You're gonna increase your deficiency risk over them days, like B vitamins, water soluble vitamins you don't retain, you pee out. So you're gonna be
Yeah.
deficient in, B12,
Yeah.
these different. So again, you could probably do an episode on that, to be fair, and go deep into it.
I think it's
The story, innit?
just as you were saying there, it's like, oh, no, it's a boring answer. But I think it's not, because you've got that irrefutable evidence behind you. Whereas if me and Finn were in the middle of Carlisle tonight going, oh yeah,
Oh,
it's
just get on
that,
this,
that,
get on
this
this.
is this.
Ice Valley is better
Whereas,
than all the other
yeah,
waters.
yeah.
Better mineral content, more
Yeah.
minerals in it.
Whereas when it comes from you and people listening, it's like, oh, he's dietitian, NHS, he's bodybuilder, he's done it for this long, he's
Yeah.
done his own cycle,
Credibility,
he's
isn't
still
it?
doing it, he's so clued up. I don't think you should almost put yourself down in that aspect, because it's
And I mean,
actually
that's
valued
probably something I
information.
need to do more of, Luke, to be honest, mate. It's like because I think I do see a lot of it on social media. It's
Yeah.
not far fetched, isn't it? It's people what they don't
Yeah.
want to hear, but I think these messages do need reinforced, don't they? Really.
100%, especially in like
Bring back to reality. I
Yeah.
almost think go
I
back to
think
the social media.
being in such a small county, I think it's definitely something
Yeah.
worth.
And it's something I've got on the list. I've just got a notebook with about 35, 40 post ideas in. So what I've thought to myself, I need to start, especially with the current climate of information you see out there,
Yeah.
it is scary. Like I can't even blame people for not having a clue what to do with
Yeah.
food or nutrition, and
Yeah.
maybe doing the wrong thing. Like there's so much conflicting information.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's one of my goals this year, to be honest. Start putting some more content very soon, planning it, and then a bit more reasoning behind it, isn't it?
Yeah.
This been the start.
On that, well, on that note, all of Joe's socials will be in the description on our Instagram or TikTok and whatnot. So make sure you go give him a follow. The post he does put out is always a lengthy caption explaining what he can't stutter out in his videos.
Literally.
But no,
Oh,
it's
thank
been
you,
a
Joe.
good one. Thank you very
No
much.
worries,
It's
lads.
been very informational. It's not almost a lot of hours we've been taking piss, laughing,
It's got cracked up
drilling
for a
each other,
reason.
and it's cracking up. And it's definitely a different conversation.
Different
I think
type of
people
cracking up.
will definitely appreciate it, and I know it will definitely attract the right clientele. So thank you very
Cheers,
much.
Luke. Cheers for having us, lads. Appreciate
Without that,
it.
cheers, guys. See you the next one.
Ta.